In the summer of 2008, Deborah decided that she wanted to attend this thing called the Oxford Experience, and she asked me to go with her, which was very nice. So off we went. Now, we didn't go directly to Oxford. We stayed in London a day or two to decompress from the travels and just to enjoy a couple of days in the city. One of the things that we did was to take a trip out to Greenwich. The Naval Observatory is in Greenwich, and we were a little bit curious about the prime meridian that was supposedly in the observatory out there. There's a marker there at the observatory for the prime meridian, so we thought it would be interesting to see that. So we got over there, and sure enough, there was the marker for the prime meridian right there in the middle of a brick courtyard. I'm not really sure exactly why they chose the Naval Observatory for the location of the prime meridian, but Britain gets to be in charge of that because one of their scientists figured out how to do longitude, which was a very laborious process back in the days when only latitude was available for navigation. There was a lengthy book written about the development of the process of measuring longitude. So the British figured that out, and they get to be home for the prime meridian. After a couple of days in London, we were all recovered from our travel, and we were ready to get on a train and go on over to Oxford. So our train left Paddington Station. So we got over to Oxford just fine and got to the buildings. We happened to be staying at Christ Church College and walked through the gates and checked in, and there was all of those old buildings just everywhere all around us with the landscaping and the men in the bowler hats, and it was just like you would see in a movie or something. Personally, I had a bad case of imposter syndrome right there for a few minutes. After we got checked in and took a look at all of those fabulous buildings, it was time for the group to go to an orientation meeting, get our schedule, our room assignments, and so forth. So we had that meeting, and I looked at my room assignment, and I was assigned to the Peckwater dormitory. As part of the Oxford experience, each of the members uh, got to stay in their own set of lodgings in one of their college dormitories. Oh, yeah, by the way, this group probably had, I would say, 55 or 60 members in it. And Oxford does several sessions each summer. I think they do it as sort of a fundraiser thing and maybe a little bit of PR for the college. But it was mostly middle aged people who were wanting to explore their nerdy side, I guess you might say. So I got up to my fourth floor room. I was on the top floor of that, and the room was a study in turquoise. The carpet was turquoise, the upholstery was turquoise, the bedspread was turquoise, so it was matched up like that. There was a nice coffee service in the room. There was a sitting room, a place for the bed tucked up under the eaves, and there was a bathroom for that room. Since it was on the top floor, my room looked out over the spires of Oxford. It was a nice view from my room up there. When we were planning the trip, the material that we looked at for the experience had several different classes that you could take. These classes lasted 5 or 6 days, just enough to get interested in your subject matter. So going down through the list, Deborah decided to do a Shakespeare class, and the one that suited me the best was one about the Vikings. So our schedule would be that each morning we would get up, we would have breakfast in the cafeteria, a nice breakfast with china and silverware and glass. It was nice, kind of a kind of had a breakfast buffet. And they would cook you an individual breakfast if you wanted to. So it was a nice breakfast to start the day. Then we would meet in our separate classes, and these classes met where I imagined that the Oxford students would go to meet with their professors and study whatever they were studying. My teacher was named David Beard, and when I met him, I said, "You wouldn't believe all the Beards that I know from back home, and most of them are good basketball players." So we had a good laugh about that. But he was very knowledgeable about those Vikings, and they started the study from when the Vikings first started invading the shores of Britain and took it all the way through to the Viking conquest. I think it was about the year 850 that the British finally got rid of the Vikings, or the Vikings assimilated into British culture. Class would last for about an hour and a half. We started, let's say, at 9 o'clock, and then at 10:30, it would be time to have a coffee break. So all of the students from all the classes would assemble there around that table where you see all those coffee cups stacked up. So there would be coffee and like a cookie or so. They call them biscuits. So we had a nice coffee break in the middle of the day. Then after the coffee break, we would go back for another hour and a half of lecture, and then it would be lunchtime. We were free for the afternoon after lunch, so Deborah and I would usually meet there when lunch was over and plan our afternoons. One of our class days was dedicated to a field trip. We had spent a couple of days sitting there watching Dr. Beard do his nice PowerPoints and talking about how horrible all those Viking raids had been for years and years, and it was bad. The country of England really wasn't in any kind of shape to defend itself against those raiders. There was just a town here and a town there and a king over this bunch of people and an earl. So it was unorganized, and they were having a hard time with it for hundreds of years. I mean, it was a long time. So finally, a king came along whose name was Alfred. He was later known as Alfred the Great, and he really was, because he was able to get things organized and get the defenses fixed up to a point where the local people could defend themselves. So our field trip was to go to a town nearby Oxford called Pewsey, which was a good place to go because there was a statue of Alfred the Great in the middle of the town square, and there were some old earthworks that the people had put around their town in order to defend themselves from those Vikings. And there was this one guy, I mean, those earthworks were impressive, but there was this one guy who worked for the Forest Service in, I believe, Indiana, that was in our class. And when he saw those earthworks, I mean, he just kind of said, there's no way that people ever built this, and just went on and on. He was a skeptic of the earthworks. So that was kind of an interesting thing, that somebody had disputed the validity of something they were standing right in front of. But it was good to know that they were able to get their defenses together. One thing Alfred established there throughout England was to find a hill and cross the hill with two roads that met at the top. And this would be a good place to establish those earthworks, so that, people could keep a watch out on their countryside and see when those Vikings were fixing to come around and tear everything all to pieces. So that field trip was a good field trip. Then after that was over, we had a nice lunch there at the Coach and Horses. It started out rainy and cloudy, but by lunchtime it had cleared off, and it was a really pretty day. I think this was in July, because those flowers were blooming everywhere. It's really, nice flowers everywhere we went all week. As I've already mentioned, after lunch, we were free for the afternoons to go anywhere and do whatever we wanted to do. So one afternoon, we took a trip. I think you would probably, to do these outside trips, I'd I think it was probably a city bus situation that you could ride out to these sites outside of Oxford. But anyway, we got on the bus and went to this castle type complex. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of this place, but it wasn't just one of those ruins that you sometimes see. There was a modern building there that looked like it was still in use, as well as the castle. And actually, this thing was bigger than a castle. This was more like an abbey complex that had fallen into ruins. Another afternoon, we took a trip out to see a thatched cottage. I don't think there was any historical significance or anything to this cottage. It was just nice to see. And plus, the flowers were beautiful out there. One afternoon, we decided to walk down to a pub that was in downtown Oxford. We had heard that C.S. Lewis, Lewis Carroll, and J.R.R. Tolkien, all three were in Oxford around the same time, and that they would go to this pub and, I guess, discuss their literary efforts. I don't know if that's true or not about them, but anyway, we went to that pub and it was a nice afternoon. For our last class, Dr. Beard explained the entire Bayeux Tapestry to us. I'm sure that tapestry had some connection to the Vikings, but I don't really remember what it is. I'd always heard of this tapestry. I mean, it's just something that you just kind of know. And all I really knew about it was that it was a great big thing and that it was covered with pictures. So imagine my surprise when Dr. Beard was able to take a PowerPoint and go over all the sections of that tapestry and explain what all of those pictures meant. It started in 1064 and went all the way to 1066, and it talked about the palace intrigue and so forth between Harold and William the Conqueror. I was quite impressed with all of it, especially the amount of detail that they were able to get into those pictures. They sewed in actual facial expressions, mustaches. They did the swords and spears. They had people's pets standing there. There was food on the tables, and there was even a depiction of Halley's Comet in there. So for me, this was a perfect ending to a nice week of learning some new things and having new experiences. After this class, we had our afternoon free as usual, and then we all met together for a garden party out in the back where there was tables stacked full of champagne and we could just chit chat with each other. And then after the garden party, we all went inside the cafeteria and had a very lively banquet to end up the experience.
The next morning after the banquet, it was time to head on, so we packed our bags and left our dorm rooms and headed to the bus stop. And when we got to the bus stop, there were a bunch of students in their gowns and collars. I think they were going to take tests. I don't think this was the graduation. But anyway, getting to see those students right there doing their student business was a good way to end a good adventure.